that we have seen how to bring motion into the graphs, let's talk about some other features that Tableau provides you. For example, so far, all the graphs that we have been creating were using some automatically used aggregations, correct? Like for example, when I try to pull any variable, especially a numerical variable, let's say I'm trying to see region wise what is the sales. So as soon as I drag that sales variable here, you must have observed that it was automatically aggregating it to the sum. Now I did not tell Tableau to do that, right? But as soon as there are multiple values that come up for a particular region, it will have to associate some sort of aggregation. And Tableau uses sum as the default aggregation measure. So now, for example, sum is not a suitable one at each and every occurrence, right? There could be certain instances where, there could be some other measure that could be applicable. For example, if I'm trying to capture the temperatures for the day and I want to kind of summarize what is the temperature for the overall day. So if suppose at an hourly basis there were temperatures captured, I will never do a sum of temperatures, correct? What I'll try to look at is the average temperature for the day. So that is where not every place sum is the right aggregation measure. You may have to change it as per the requirement. So Tableau, even though it offers sum as the default aggregation, it also offers you certain other aggregation measures that can be applied for the continuous variables. Now, how do you change that? Let me show you this down but arrow. Now, how do you change that? Let me show you. This down arrow will allow you to change the default aggregation, which is sum, to any of the other aggregations which are provided by Tableau. So average, median, count or the distinct count, even your minimum and maximum kind of values. There are several percentiles that you can try to use, or there is also standard deviation and variance that can be used for either the sample data or the population. So you can choose whichever aggregation measure you would like to apply onto this data. Let's say for the time being, I am choosing average. Now what I understand is that on an average, let me assign the labels and we'll be able to talk upon it better. So on an average, what is the sales that each and every region is doing? So on an average, central region gives you $210.95 ka sales. East region gives you $251.53 of sales, and similarly for the rest of the region. So now this is up to us to decide what should be the aggregation measure that should be applied onto the continuous numerical variable that you are choosing. In case it is a variable like quantity, I think count would be the most suitable option over there for you. So depending on the variable and the requirement, you can change the aggregation measures from here and you can look at your graphs. So let's say for example, I'm choosing the minimum as the aggregation measure. You see the minimum values are getting reflected here. Now, although minimum of sales is not a usual thing that we would love to see, but this is just to show you as an example that this is how you can easily change those calculations without having to do anything manually. Let me change it back to the sum, and yes, these are the values that we can see each of the region is contributing to. In case you want to make it look even more beautiful, let me drag the region variable. Where do we have region? Here. Let me drag the region variable and drop it onto color, and you will see that there are 4 different colors associated with each of the bars. So this is how you can change the default aggregation that you have applied onto the data. Now, apart from the default aggregation, let me tell you that what if you don't want a aggregation measure to be applied? Okay, as in what I'm talking about is when each and every data point should be treated differently, you will end up getting a kind of a scatter plot. Let's say for example, I am trying to look at any 2 numerical variables. So let me take sales and profit. Okay. although not the optimum thing to look at when it comes to the numerical variables and their relationships. Sales and profit is ideally not a very apt example, but based on the variables that are present right now with us, I have selected the sales and the profit variable, and you can see there is a single circle that appears over here, isn't it? Now, why is this a single circle? Because we had more than 12,000 observations in this data, right? But then why is a single circle coming here? That is because of the aggregation. Sum of profit gave us a single value, and sum of sales also gave us a single value. So when those values, x and y coordinates, have been combined together, there is a single point that came into the picture. So this is ideally the total sales and the total profit that you can see right now in this particular graph. However, this is not an ideal scatter plot. Scatter plot is a graph where every data point will be shown individually such that you can identify the type of relationship that profit has with respect to sales. So, in order to remove these aggregations and display every data point individually, what you can do is you can go to the analysis menu and you will see that the aggregate measures is checked by default, because of which it always applies sum as the aggregation measure. Now, if I uncheck this, you will see that this is the kind of graph that I get. Although this is a very densely clustered kind of a graph here, but understand that there are many values which are present here. So I'm just trying to zoom in into that graph to show you the values even better. And what I want you to observe is that this graph is actual scattered plot, because as many values you had, all of them are being represented over here as an individual point. Can you see? As I hover over this graph, the values in the labels are changing. So this is where you can clearly understand how to uncheck the aggregate measures in the analysis menu in order to remove the aggregation that it applies onto the variables that you are working on, and that is where you will end up getting a typical scatter plot. So tomorrow if you try to generate any kind of scatter plots in Tableau, remember this is the place where you can uncheck the aggregate measures, and you will get each individual data point generated in the form of a point. So this is something that I wanted to discuss upon the scatter plots that you can create in Tableau. Now, apart from this, let me also show you that Tableau offers some other calculation related features as well. So we are now moving towards calculations in Tableau. Now, there are several inbuilt calculations that Tableau offers us, but apart from that, we are allowed to create our own calculated fields as well. We will discuss on both those aspects, but firstly, I would like to talk upon the inbuilt calculations that Tableau offers. And Tableau has created certain calculations because Tableau knows that these are the kind of calculations that people usually use on a day-to-day basis. So they have given us those calculations readily available to use so that we don't have to sit and create calculated variables on the basis of those formulas. So let me show you a few of the examples where you will understand how to use those quick table calculations that Tableau offers. So firstly, let me pull up some data into this graph, and for that matter I would like to use that same graph which we had. Now that you are aware of those variables, let me pull up this graph. Let me duplicate this one. Okay, yeah. So now in this duplicated sheet, let me drag it to the end. You can adjust your sheets, okay, by dragging and dropping them wherever you like. So you can adjust the order of those sheets. Now let's say I want to look at this graph where I'm trying to see the category and the subcategory wise sales. And this is the kind of graph that we have got. If you observe, this is my grouped variable which I'm using here. So stationery items is a single bar, and even chairs and tables are represented using a single bar. Okay. Now let me talk about certain quick table calculations that we can apply onto this data. So whenever you apply any quick table calculations, it is a numerical variable which will be used in order to add those table calculations, right? So there are certain options which are available over here. For example, you have certain quick table calculations like running total, which will give you the cumulative total of all the values. Then there is difference, which allows you to compare between the categories in order to understand how one category is doing with respect to the other category. Is that category doing better or worse? You'll be able to understand that. There is also percent difference, which is often used by the sales guys in order to talk upon how they did better than the other regions or with respect to the other sales representatives, right? So we have percent difference as well. We have percent of total. How much is each category contributing to with respect to the overall sales? That is something that I can understand in terms of percentage value. Similarly, you can also give the bars with respect to the ranks. So the product which is giving you the highest sales will be at rank 1, and the one that is giving you the lowest sales will be at the lower rank. Similarly, you can also see the percentiles, you can also see the moving averages. So there are a lot of quick table calculations that we have over here. There are certain others which are currently disabled because these are mainly related to the date related variables, okay. But let's try out 3 to 4 of them so that you get a hang of how this quick table calculations can be used. Let's start off with the very first one, which is the running total. Let's say, for example, I click on this running total. You immediately see the graph changing. What do you see here? You see a cumulative kind of a graph where the bars are getting accumulated based on the summation of the previous value. So let me just label it in order to help you understand better. So let's say, for example, bookcases was the very first category. So the value that you see over here, within this value, you are adding the total sales for the chairs and tables group. And this is the final figure that you get for this. Now within this, you're adding the sales for the furnishings and you get the updated figure. And so on and so forth, where you can see the total revenue generated by the superstore in the 4 years, 2021 to 2024 is 29 lakhs 31,010. So this is the cumulative total that we have got for the overall sales that the company has done. Now, as soon as you apply a quick table calculation, I want you to observe this triangular icon that you see placed on the pill. This triangular icon indicates that there is some quick table calculation that has been applied onto this graph. So as you see the graph as a third person, you should be able to observe this triangle and you should be able to understand that there is some calculation that has been applied. So in case you don't want that calculation, feel free to clear the table calculation. So you have this quick option available here which will delete that calculation for you and you get back the original graph. But there are some other calculations also which I want you to observe, like the difference. When you click on difference, I want you to observe that there is something called as one null which has appeared here, right? And this is where you can see this one null is because it is treating the very first category as 0. Now bookcases will be considered as 0, and compared to bookcases, how good or bad are we doing with respect to chairs and tables? That is what we are trying to identify here. So if you see, chairs and tables is going in the profit, right? If you observe the axis over here, 0 is in the center, which means there are certain categories doing well which show the profit. There are certain categories which are doing bad which show the loss. So in comparison to bookcases, chairs and tables are giving us a profit. And this is the total value that we have here. How better are we doing compared to the bookcases? So this much is the better value. Similarly, in comparison to chairs and tables, how good are we doing in case of the furnishings? You can see we are going totally in loss, correct? That's a huge number that we have got over here. Similarly, how are we doing in comparison to the furnishings in terms of the appliances? Appliances is doing better than the furnishings, so you can see we are going towards the profit. In comparison to appliances, binders is also taking us to the profit, and so on and so forth. This is the kind of graph which is getting created right now as a default version when we are trying to look at the difference. But now there are certain changes that I probably need to do to this graph. Firstly, the most important point is how should I compare appliances with furnishings, because they actually belong to two different categories, isn't it? So just continuously comparing with the previous value is not going to help me. So that is where what I can do is I can go on to this and I can say compute using pane down instead of table down. When I select table down as the default, it just keeps on comparing with the previous values, right? Now I am saying do it pane wise. So can you see, instead of one null, there are three nulls now, because there were three major categories, and in each of the category the first one is considered as 0, and with respect to that we start comparing the second one. So now that this is the graph that we have got, let me also show you that relative to is by default set to previous, because of which it tries to compare with the previous value. But you do have other options as well. You can compare it with the next value or maybe with the first or the last value. I usually prefer selecting the first option such that every value in that pane gets compared to the first value. Like for example, in the furniture category, I am trying to compare chairs and tables as well as furnishings with respect to bookcases. So in case of chairs and tables, I am doing a profit in comparison to bookcases. But in case of furnishings, I am going into a little loss, right? So now furnishings is not being compared with chairs and tables. I'll just undo to show you the previous result. Can you observe? When furnishings was compared with chairs and tables, the loss was too huge. But now I am comparing furnishings with bookcases. Let me redo. I am comparing furnishings with bookcases, and that is where you understand that it is not doing a very major loss, but yes, it is doing lesser sales compared to bookcases. That is what we understand. Similarly, now when we look at the office supplies category, we will consider the very first entry, which is appliances, as 0, and with respect to appliances, how are the rest of the categories doing? Binders is doing great, paper and stationery items not too good. We are doing great in terms of the storage, but supplies again is going into loss. So this is the comparison that we are doing right now with respect to the appliances. However, let me also tell you that we need not always compare it with the very first value that we have. Like for example, what if I don't want to compare everything with appliances? I want to set paper as the benchmark. Okay, just an example. Let's assume I want to set paper as the benchmark, and that is where what I can do is simply drag paper and drop it as the very first value. Can you see? Now all of these categories are being compared with paper. So this is where you can clearly observe that everything is being compared with the very first category into the pane that we are looking at. So this is how you can make use of the difference. And this difference can be computed either table wise or the pane wise, and you can also decide the relativity level, whether you need to do it with the previous, next, first or last. But this is a very good option when you want to do certain sort of calculations and comparisons while presenting your reports to your managers. Now, just like we have tried applying the difference operation, you also have the percent difference. So the same kind of thing in case you want to talk in terms of the percentage numbers, which is usually something that the sales guys prefer to do. That is where you can make use of percent difference, and you can clearly see chairs and tables in comparison to bookcases is doing 444% better, right? That sounds like a great number. So this is where the percent difference operation can be used. But yeah, let me show you some other calculations as well. One of my favorite is percent of total, where you can clearly see percent wise what is the contribution of each and every category. So let's say, for example, if you talk about bookcases, in the overall revenue its contribution is about 4.5%, right? Chairs and tables, because we have grouped it, that sounds like a huge number here. Almost 24.3% is what it is contributing in the overall revenue. Furnishings is contributing to just about 4%. Paper is contributing to again 3.5%, and so on and so forth. So if you sum up all of these values together, you are bound to get a 100% result, right? But this is where you are seeing the percentage value instead of the actual value. So this is also a very good option that you can make use of with respect to the quick table calculations. And similarly, you also have rank, where you can apply the ranks, where you can see, given that chairs and tables were giving us the maximum revenue, the sales value was typically high for that, so that is at rank 1. And the maximum rank that you see here is for supplies, right? And that means that supplies is giving us the lowest sales of all time, correct? So this is the kind of rank related quick table calculation that we can apply onto the data. So there are several quick table calculations, and feel free to choose whichever suits your requirement, or matches the kind of insights that you want to deliver to the audience, be it the manager of your company, or let's say the right stakeholders for which you are trying to build this dashboard. So this is about the quick table calculations that you can easily use, because Tableau has provided them as an inbuilt feature, correct? But what if you need to create some other calculations apart from what Tableau offers you? So I'm talking about creating calculated variables. This is where you can write your own formulas, just like you write in Excel. You can use certain functions, write your own formulas, and you can create those calculated variables, which can then be used into the graphs, just like you use any of the other variables present here. So this is where we will discuss about how to create calculated field. So when it comes to creating calculated field, we can create numerical as well as categorical fields. And let's try out couple of examples here in order to understand how we can write our own formulas and create those fields. So let's say one of the technique over here is, let me just show you this option. There are two ways using which you can create a calculated field. One is through the analysis menu, you can go and select this option here, or the other, but the trickiest approach is where you can ideally scroll down to the very bottom of this section, where you'll be able to see this white space here. You can right click and you can go to the option of create calculated field. So it's up to us which option you want to prefer in order to create a calculated field. Whichever way you try to open it up, this is the window that you're going to reach, okay? Where this is the area where you can write your own formula in order to create that calculation. And along with that, if you expand this box, you will see there is a help window where all of the functions, just like you have in Excel, there are several functions available in case of Tableau as well. And you will see that a lot of functions are equivalent to the functions that you have in Excel, because Tableau was ideally wanting the people using Excel to migrate to Tableau. So that's why they tried to stick to the same kind of functionalities. So the best part that I see over here is that they have also segregated those functions for you. So you have number related functions, and there are several that you can see in this particular list. And you also have string related functions, where you can see these are the various ones. You can also see functions related to date, like the date add, date difference, etc. Finding out the parts of the date value also is available here. You can see month, quarter, today, week, year, all of these are available. Apart from that, you also have logical, meaning your if else kind of conditional statements can also be written in order to perform certain kind of calculations. And the best thing is, you just need to select a particular function over here, and you get to see the help associated with it. So let's say if I expand this particular box, You can see what is the syntax that will be required when you're writing this if logical statement, and they have given that with the help of an example as well, so that you can replicate something similar, right? So let's try to create our own calculated variables, and we will try creating maybe one numerical variable, one categorical variable, so that you get to see the variety in the functions as well, okay? Now, let's say for example, I want to create a variable where I'm trying to calculate the cost of a product. Okay, we have product related data given to us, but if you observe, we have been given the total sales, and we have also been given the total profit associated with that particular order that was being placed. But what if I want to identify what was the cost of the product? So based on these two variables that have been provided to us, the profit and the sales, I can actually calculate the cost of the product, right? So sales minus profit, as we know, gives us the value for the cost of product. I'll use that simple formula for now in order to get you that calculated variable. So now this area over here, the text area, is where you can give the variable name. So suppose if I name it as cost of product, this will be the name of the variable that I'll end up creating, okay? And what I'm going to write over here is my plain calculation formula. So I'll just write sales, and as soon as I start typing, can you observe it gives me the IntelliSense. So I can just hit enter and select that particular variable, and you can see it has been populated here in the formula. So sales minus profit is what I'm interested in. So let me select profit, and this is the formula. Now, as soon as you finish writing your formula, do you observe it says the calculation is valid, which means this particular equation that we have written here is going to yield some result, correct? Now logically it could be wrong, but syntactically you are correct. That is what it means. Now suppose if this is an incomplete formula, okay, I've just written sales minus. Can you see it is prompting me that the calculation contains errors, which means what? As I click on this, it will suggest me what is the missing part over here. So it is identifying that, maybe this error is because you are missing an identifier. Identifier is nothing but a variable name. So now that I finish off, this equation, sales minus profit, you can see it now indicates that the calculation is valid. So now once this calculation is valid, I can click on OK, and you will see that a new variable cost of product has been populated here in the list. And do you observe the data type icon associated with it? Equal to hash, which means what? This is a calculated variable and not a variable which was a part of the file. So this is where we have created this cost of product as a variable. So now if I want to use it in order to create any of the graphs, I can easily do that. So let me go on to a fresh sheet here, and we are getting the cost of product, right? So let me drag simply the product name for now, and this is a warning that it is giving me, which states that the field being added may contain as many as 1849 members, and the recommended maximum for this shelf is 1000, which means by default it will try to add up to 1000. But do you want to add all the members or then filter and add? No, I want to add all the members. So let's click on that option, and this is the kind of table that it has given me. This is a simple text table if you see, but for now I'm fine with the simple text table, okay? I don't need a typical graph over here as such. So with respect to each of the product name, I would like to plot what is the cost of the product. See, by default it again changed the chart type to a bar graph, but I'm fine with a simple text table, and you can see that it is now using the cost of product just like any other variable as part of that data, right? So this is the kind of calculated field, a numerical calculated field that we have created, which can be used into any of the graphs and charts that you would like to create using that variable. So product name and its associated cost is what we are looking at. Now this is a continuous numerical variable that we created, correct? Similarly, what if I want to create a calculated variable which could be a kind of a categorical variable? Let me pull up some data once again and let's try to create a calculated field here. Okay, let me go back to that data where we were looking at the subcategory wise sales, right? One of our favorite graphs. But yeah, let me duplicate this once again so that, I do not affect this graph. Okay. Now, within this graph, let me firstly remove the quick table calculation that we had applied, okay? This does not affect my original graph from which I created this copy. Yeah? You can still see the original sheet is still showing the percent of total, but the duplicate sheet that I created out of this is where I have removed that quick table calculation. So it just shows me what is the subcategory wise sales. Now, suppose if I want to, assign certain discounts on the basis of whatever sales each of the category is doing. Let's say, for example, those categories which are giving me a total sales of less than 1 lakh, I would just like to give a 5% discount rate there, because any which ways lesser sales, I wouldn't want to offer a lot of discount. So 5% discount for categories which are giving me less than 1 lakh of sales. Okay. I would like to increase the discount rate to 10% if the category is doing sales up to 2 lakhs. So 10% for 2 lakhs. Similarly, 15% for 3 lakhs, up to 3 lakhs. And any category that is doing more than 3 lakhs, then it could be any higher value, I would like to give a discount rate of 20% over there. So this is where I am talking about applying the discount rates based on the condition of how much of sales is each of the category doing, correct? So I'm taking you towards the use of conditional execution statements, which is like the if-else structure that we can make use of. Just like we can make use of if-else in Excel or any other programming languages, similarly we can write an if-else structure in case of Tableau as well and get such kind of calculated conditional variable created for you. Okay. So let's try to implement this. So let me go to the analysis menu. I'll again suggest to create a calculated field, a fresh one. And this is where I will try to firstly name it as discount rate. Alright. And at the same time, let me keep the help for the if statement open such that, in case we require to use the syntax or have a look at it, this is what we need to compare with. Okay. So now let's start writing. So what did we discuss? That if the sales is up to 1 lakh, we would like to assign a discount rate of 5% and then the rest of the categories. Okay. So if sum of sales, okay, we can not just take sales here because we'll try to look at aggregated value, right? So if the sum of sales is less than or equal to 1 lakh, then I would like to assign a discount rate is equal to 5%. Sorry. Yes, 5%. So can you see the discount rate equal to 5% is a kind of string that I have passed here. So this will act like a categorical variable. Else if, okay, now let me copy paste a few sections from here. So else if sum of sales is less than or equal to 2 lakhs, then the discount rate should be, as we discussed, 10%, correct? Else if sum of sales is less than or equal to 3 lakhs, then the discount rate that I would like to offer is 15%. Else, anything above 3 lakhs, we would like to offer a discount rate of 20%. So this is where I'll just change the value to 20%, right? And this is where I am done with the if-else statement. But it says that the calculation contains errors. What is happening? Okay, expected end to match if at character 0. So if you observe here, the if statement ends with an end statement, which I have not passed here yet. So it is still assuming that I am writing in continuation. So let me just pass the end statement here. and yes, this says the calculation is valid. So this is where I have created the right calculation. Let me just cross check. Sum of sales less than or equal to 1 lakh, discount rate should be 5%, up to 2 lakhs discount rate should be 10%, up to 3 lakhs discount rate should be 15%, and anything above that should be a 20%. So this looks good. Let me click on OK. And yes, do you see discount rate is a new variable that has got created now, and the data type associated with is equal to ABC, because it's a string variable that we have created, not a numerical one. For numerical, we saw it is equal to hash. For a categorical variable, it is equal to ABC. Now that the variable has got created, let's use it. So let's say I want to assign the discount rates as the labels to this graph, okay. So instead of these default sales values that are being used here, let me drag and drop the discount rate. Here you go. So you can see stationery items and your supplies, and as well as paper, right? These are the three categories where your sales were less than 1 lakh. So you can see paper was slightly less than 1 lakh, just about 300, or not even 300, $250 lesser, right? But you can see because it was falling under the less than 1 lakh category, you have 5% discount rate applied for the products related to paper, supplies as well as stationery items. Whereas for those which were doing a sales of up to 2 lakhs, you can see the discount rate that has been applied is 10. Up to 3 lakhs, it is 15, and anything that is going beyond 3 lakhs, which is the phones and chairs and tables, you can see there is a 20% discount that I am going to offer on those set of products, right? So this is where we have used the aggregation on the basis of sum of sales, based on which we have tried creating a calculated variable, which is a categorical variable that decides what should be the discount rate applied on those set of products depending on the total sales that that subcategory is doing for us. Okay. Now we can also probably try to use this variable in order to color the bars. Right now my bars are colored on the basis of the category, right? But let's say instead of category, I want to color it on the basis of the discount rate. I can easily do that. So I've just dragged and dropped the discount rate variable onto color, and you can clearly see those blue bars are representing 5%, the orange bars are representing 10%, red ones indicating 15% of discount, and the green color indicating a 20% of discount. So this is how you can create your own calculated categorical variable, okay? And there are a lot of functions that will allow you to achieve this. Now let me show you one last example related to calculated field, especially something on the date related variables, okay? So we have the order date and the ship date, correct? So based on this, can we perform a date difference operation in order to identify what would be the number of days that would be required in order to ship a product from the date of ordering? So all I'm trying to say is, let's say if I ordered the product today and the product is going to be shipped tomorrow, so there is a 1 day difference, right? I want to calculate that difference such that I'm able to suggest the logistics department that these are the areas of improvement. There are certain products which are being shipped quite late, and based on that they can then improvise their strategies, correct? So I'm just trying to perform a date difference operation here so that you get to see one example related to the date related functions. So for now I don't need a sheet. I will just go to create calculated field and name this variable as maybe days to ship. And what will we use here? The date difference function. Now this date difference function takes multiple arguments. So let's say the first argument that is required here is the date part. I want to calculate the number of days or the number of months or the number of years. That is what I need to specify here. Of course, I am interested in calculating the number of days. So day is the date part that I have passed. Start date, of course, is the order date because that is when the order actually came into picture. And the end date will be the ship date, such that it will calculate the difference between the ship date and the order date and give us or return us the number of days in between. So this is the function that I am writing here. Start of week is an optional argument. So if you see here, anything that comes in this square brackets while it provides you that help, that is usually an optional argument. So I don't need it right now. The calculation is valid. So I can just freeze this calculation. I'll click on OK. And yes, I get to see a new variable created here. And can you see the data type icon now? Equal to hash. Again, because it's a numerical variable, correct? Number of days is what we have got there. So now that we have got this variable, let's try to, work upon this. So let's say I want to see how many number of days did it take for an order to ship. So with respect to every order, we have a unique identifier, which is the order ID. So let's take that same one and let me drag and drop days to ship. And it again gave me a bar graph, but that's not very clearly visible. So yeah, let me change it to the text table and or maybe a highlight table as well, such that those colors, kind of show you the intensity. Of course, all of these colors are almost in the green shade because they are close to each other, but there will be certain values. Let me see. Yeah, there is some order which has even taken 1176 days. Wow, that's too much. But let me just maybe change this to a simple text table and let me just show you the values here, okay? So the total number of days that are required in order to ship this particular order was 5. Similarly, for the rest of them, you can see these are the total number of products. But there is a catch here. What if, there were 5 products, okay, which were present as part of this particular order. So the summation of those days would have given you 5. There's a possibility there, right? That every product actually took just a single day to be shipped. But because sum is the default aggregation that we have applied, it could have summed up all the ones over there and we have, probably got that 5. So maybe what we can do over here is we can change this to maybe count. And yes, do you see? So it actually counted the number of days from there, and that's where you can see that it was just 1 day that it took for this order to ship. There were 5 days that were taken in order to ship this third order over here, and then so on and so forth. So using the right aggregation measure is very, very important, especially when it comes to, presenting the right insights to the stakeholders. So this is where we have tried working upon creating a continuous numerical variable, creating a categorical variable, as well as creating a date related variable, correct? So you can create your custom calculations in Tableau and use them as and when you need to, in order to make your graphs more meaningful, to help you convey the right set of insights, and mainly to uncover some hidden insights that are present as a combination of different variables. So you can combine that together and you can come up with a new variable which could actually make more sense to the audience, right? So that's about the creation of calculations and using those calculations in Tableau.
Like this video, subscribe to our channel and comment on the concept you want to learn next.